It is Thursday, it's the 5th of June, and you're watching ARIRANG, Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Geon-young. The results of yesterday's local elections are out, and both main political parties in the nation have reasons to celebrate. In some sense, the ruling party is seen as having fared well, as it avoided a huge backlash from last month's deadly ferry disaster, while the main opposition could find some consolation in winning the nation's most high-profile race, that being for Seoul City Mayor. Our Park Ji-won has the details.
The election results for the 17 heads of local governments show the ruling Saenuri Party victorious in 8 regions and the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy in 9. Although Seoul was taken by the main opposition camp, the ruling party fared well in the metropolitan area. The party won the hotly contested Incheon mayoral race in Korea's most heavily populated province of Gyeonggi-do. However, the main opposition party claimed victories in the central region in both Chungcheongdo provinces, the new administrative city of Sejong, and Daejeon City. Considering these regions traditionally lean more moderate conservative, the main opposition party will be buoyed by its strong showing there. The nation's southwest and southeast regions didn't veer from their traditional preferences, although rival party or independent candidates had strong showings in the Liberals' power base of Gwangju and the southern port city of Busan. As for Seoul, incumbent Mayor Park Won-soon from the main opposition party beat his rival Chung Mong-jun.
This is a victory of all citizens who called for a fundamental change following the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. It's a victory for all citizens who work honestly.
I want to thank the citizens of Seoul. I humbly accept the choice of the people. I hope Mayor Park will lead Seoul by taking on the difficult situations facing the city.
The Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces were the last 2 provinces to confirm winners due to very tight races. In Gyeonggi-do, the ruling party's Nam Kyung-pil edged to victory in the governor's race against his rival by less than 1 percentage point. In Gangwon-do, incumbent Governor Choi Mun-soon also scored a tight win. During the local elections, 17 education chiefs were also elected, 13 of which are considered progressive. Seoul's new education superintendent will be Cho Hee-yeon, a liberal professor, after beating out 2 strong conservative candidates. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
So as we just saw, there was no clear winner between the main rival parties in the June 4th local elections, and that can be interpreted in a number of different ways. Our Laah Hyun-kyung reports on what analysis our analysts are reading into the results.
The public raised the red flag against the ruling party while keeping the opposition on its toes. Experts say the local election results reflect public anger toward the current administration's handling of April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster that claimed hundreds of lives. But they add, not handing over a landslide victory to the opposition means people are willing to give the Park Geun-hye administration a second chance.
We thank the people who have supported us and given us another chance. We will continue to carry out reforms within our party.
By snatching 9 of the 17 seats up for grabs, the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has gained an upper hand for now. But the very narrow win, despite favorable conditions, indicates that the public is still wary of fully trusting the opposition party.
We will do our best to shed light on the truths behind the ferry disaster and focus on establishing fundamental solutions.
The upcoming July by-elections will be another opportunity for the rival parties to gauge public sentiment. Whether the ruling party can strike a chord with the public through President Park's soon-to-be-conducted cabinet reshuffle will be key in regaining support. The NPAD, in the meantime, will have to show and prove that its co-leadership is solid in order to avoid losing momentum. Laah Hyun-kyung, ARIRANG News.
Well, the presidential office of Cheongwade has responded. It says it humbly accepts the will of the people as reflected in the local election results. Presidential office spokesperson Min Kyung-wook said Thursday that the administration would do its best to honor the collective voice of the Korean public and bring about reforms to the nation. Now, the comments echo remarks made by President Park Geun-hye last month when she vowed to fundamentally overhaul the public service sector and root out abnormal practices in society following the Sewol-ho ferry disaster. And the Korean people exercised their democratic right to vote in record numbers for the local elections. So what do they have to say about the results one day later? Well, our Shin Se-min went to the streets to find that out.
Public reaction to the results of Wednesday's local election has been somewhat divided, but all seem to agree that April's ferry accident was a deciding factor.
For this local election, I was greatly influenced by the Sewol-ho ferry tragedy when casting my vote. I want more responsible leaders to represent me and my thoughts.
Simply put, I voted because I want a just society for all. Many politicians seem to ignore the voices of the people. Take the Sewol-ho ferry accident, for example. Instead of leaders trying to save face, I want them to realize what they are missing and have already missed.
The elections were for local representatives, but were seen as a barometer of public sentiment following the ferry disaster. But each voter entered the polling booth with other issues in mind that matter to them.
Thinking of my mom, I want stronger support for working mothers. The disadvantages that minorities face should be addressed, especially for women and those that are weak.
Looking at the big picture, regardless of the political party, I just hope that those who have been elected keep their promises and keep their ears open to the people.
I believe humble, honest politicians make the best politicians. I hope all of those representing the people think twice and even 3 times before making pledges. Instead of following trends and going after fame, I think the elected officials should look toward making the community and the country a better place.
The results are out and the people have spoken. The nation now waits to see if those they've chosen to represent them live up to expectations. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Well, in politics, it's never too early to look ahead to the next elections. And the next big one here in Korea comes in 2017, when the nation will choose its next president. Our Son Jung-in tells us how Wednesday's election results may have provided some hints about who might appear on that ballot.
Incumbent Seoul Mayor Park Won-soon's landslide victory has set the fates of 2 political big shots on opposite courses. Although Mayor Park has made it clear he has no intention to run in the next presidential race, some say the main opposition party may not have any better options when 2017 comes around.
The second phase of Park Won-soon's administrative policies will focus on integration. I will move in step with my supporters as well as with my opponents.
Speaking of opponents, Park's competitor and 7-term lawmaker Chung Mong-jun was defeated, a first in his 26-year political career, losing momentum toward becoming the ruling party's next presidential candidate. The beneficiary of his losses may be Gyeonggi-do Governor-elect Nam Kyung-pil, who now rises near the top of the list of possible ruling party candidates in the 2017 race.
This will be done with President Park Geun-hye and the residents of Gyeonggi-do. I will give my all for renovating this province and Korea.
Another name being tossed around as potential presidential candidate from the ruling party is Jeju Island Governor-elect Won Hee-ryong. Won, along with Nam, are seen as young politicians who will help the ruling party transition from its older generation base. As for the main opposition party, Chungcheongnam-do Governor re-elect An Hee-jung is garnering attention. After serving time in jail for accepting illegal funds in the 2002 presidential race, An, one of late President Roh Moo-hyun's closest confidants, won the Chungcheongnam-do governor seat in 2010. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
When the latest news meets the latest business stories, we give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Business Today with Moon Gon-young. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
The new head of a U.S. organization that promotes relations with Asia says North Korea's nuclear program and humanitarian aid should be dealt with as separate issues. Now, Park Geun-hye, president of the Marine and Mike Mansfield Foundation, said that people-centered diplomacy through informal meetings is the key to approaching Pyongyang at this point. Well, he also says he's not optimistic about a swift resumption of the six-party talks on the North nuclear program. He added that Pyongyang does not seem to be open to negotiations. Geun-hye was a key member of President Obama's first presidential campaign team, serving as the director for policies related to the Korean Peninsula. Meanwhile, dozens of American companies have apparently been doing business with North Korea, this despite strict U.S. sanctions on that regime. Bloomberg reports that some companies listed on the central bank of the DPRK as being in their supply chain in filings with the Securities and Exchange Commission. IBM and Hewlett-Packard were among those mentioned, and a spokesperson for HP said investigations have been underway since January to determine whether its products contain North Korean minerals, but said none have been detected yet. Meanwhile, IBM's filing said that its products may include gold processed in the north. The 25th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre came and went, and it looks like Chinese authorities did a solid job there, keeping the occasion under wraps. But there was one memorial that brought out tens of thousands of people in remembrance, and that was in China's special administrative region of Hong Kong. Our Connie Lee takes you there.
A massive candlelight vigil lit up the night sky Wednesday night in a downtown park in Hong Kong. Tens of thousands of people remembered the bloody crackdown on democracy in Beijing's Tiananmen Square exactly 25 years ago in 1989. The demonstrators, including many who flew in from mainland China, called on Beijing to admit to the killings and account for what happened.
This is my first time participating in this sort of large-scale political event. I hope one day in China, citizens will truly have the freedom to demonstrate.
Although the former British colony, Hong Kong, has been under Chinese rule since 1997, it still enjoys civil liberties not allowed in mainland China today. Leading up to the anniversary, the Chinese government cracked down heavily on any mention of the massacre, prohibiting public discussion and censoring online references.
This is, of course, the 25th anniversary of Tiananmen Square crackdown. And what we've seen this year is an intensification of the crackdown against all sorts of people in civil society. And it's really wide in scope. It's not just confined to Beijing, it's nationwide.
In Beijing, dozens of activists were detained for attempting to commemorate the anniversary, and tourists and journalists in Tiananmen Square were searched. It was back in 1989, on June 4th, when hundreds of pro-democracy activists were removed by force and killed for protesting in the busy city square. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye has vowed to increase the pace of both Korea's economic recovery and her reform drive. Now, at a luncheon with those of national merit and their families today, the president said she'll push ahead with her 3-year economic innovation plan and lay the foundation for peaceful reunification with North Korea. Well, in the aftermath of a deadly ferry accident in April, President Park also pledged to root out ill practices in society to make Korea a safer place to live. following the ruling party's better than expected results in this week's local elections, the president is thought to have expressed new determination to move forward in handling state affairs. Concerned about the pronounced effects last month's ferry disaster has had on the domestic economy, Korea's finance minister is calling on the business community to advance investment and employment. He was speaking in a meeting with local business leaders, and Hyun-suk said Korea's economy was on a moderate recovery track, but he did express concerns about the prolonged impact of the ferry sinking on the service sector and consumption. Now, later this month, the finance ministry will announce its economic policy direction plans for the second half of the year, which will focus on raising the country's potential growth rate. Well, although the overall Korean economy continues on the path to recovery, gross national income is not keeping pace. In fact, last quarter's figure did climb, but at its slowest rate in 2 years. Our Hwang Ji-hye explains why.
The Bank of Korea said Thursday that the nation's gross national income rose a mere 0.5% in the first quarter from the previous one, the slowest pace of expansion in 2 years. While the gauge of the population's purchasing power faced slower growth, the domestic economy managed to keep up with its recovery pace. Korea's gross domestic product grew 0.9% in the January to March period from a quarter earlier. That matches up with the growth of around 1% that the economy has posted over recent quarters. The central bank attributed the gap between gross national income and gross domestic product to shrinking dividend earned by Korean companies from their investments overseas. Experts say, however, the trend of income falling short of domestic economic activities helped worsen economic sentiment of the nation's household. They add that while Korea continues to create a relatively high number of jobs, the quality of jobs hasn't improved. From a year earlier, Asia's fourth largest economy grew 3.9% in the first 3 months of this year, accelerating from 3.7% growth in the fourth quarter last year. The central bank expects the domestic economy to grow 4% for all of this year. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Korea has reached an agreement with China to boost bilateral ties. The two countries' finance ministers vowed to strengthen cooperation within international organizations. Seoul's finance minister Hyun-suk shook hands on the deal Wednesday with China's finance minister Laah Hyun-kyung in Beijing. The two ministers said their enhanced bilateral cooperation will first be seen at the APEC meetings and at the ASEAN +3 meetings. Beijing is set to hold the APEC finance ministers meeting come October. So the conservative ruling party and its liberal rival split key races in local elections that analysts say ended in a tie amid rising public indignation over the government's handling of April's deadly ferry sinking. But what about its impact on the economy and beyond? Dr. Kim Byung-ji joins us live in the studio for an in-depth discussion. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
All right, so what kind of an economic impact are we going to be expecting from the election results?
Local government chiefs, they usually have very limited impact in terms of like what they can do about the national economy, for instance. So from the beginning, this is not a political event that should have a profound effect on the economic policy for the nation as a whole. But for Seoul, taking one example, incumbent mayor who is the victor of this election this time, Park Geun-hye, has been advocating the preservation of overall community here rather than heavy focus on redevelopment project. While his challenger, Jung Mong-jun, was advocating restarting a major redevelopment project all around the city and boosting up the overall real estate market. Seoul being such an important part of the country here, if Jung Mong-jun had been elected, we could have expected big-time boost in terms of real estate market, but here that possibility is gone for now. And other localities, last time, 4 years ago, there were major competition battles being fought over different kinds of regional development projects. This time it was very quiet because of partly the Sewol disaster, for sure.
Right, the ferry disaster.
Right, and so this time we don't see that as much. Overall, of course, most of the candidates were promising greater spending on the welfare side, but they'll have to be paying close attention to the fiscal balance of their local governments as well. And then voters have expressed their concern about the fiscal health for individual localities as well. So as a whole, to answer your question, I don't think we're expecting any major impact in terms of nationwide economic policy here.
Now, what about education? Education is, of course, an important economic issue when seen from a longer-term aspect.
Right.
And we saw the election results of the superintendents of education nationwide. Of course, the one in Seoul had a very controversial race there. But what do we see in the election results?
The official, the setting of the election of superintendents for education, they don't have official party supports, but we knew who were progressive members and who were conservative, candidates and so on. And in Seoul, we had a very interesting turnout here because of the fight between the two conservative candidates, and looks like this the one that was elected as the new superintendent for education got a windfall gain from this political fight between the conservatives. Nationwide, we have to recognize, I think 13 out of 17 superintendents for education were elected with their political inclination towards progressivism or liberalism here. And what it shows, I think, is not the people's indictment of the current political, the ruling party or the government itself, rather their desire to see some kind of new direction for education, especially after all this Sewol ferry disaster and controversies over Korea's excessive emphasis on competition on education. So those progressive candidates who had new ideas about making education less competitive and less stratified in a way, in terms of making more of these high schools equal, getting rid of some of the special high schools and so on. I think they got the support from the people. So rather than political indictment, I think this is people's expression of their desire for new direction for Korea's education.
Sometimes, I think, for some of the students here in Korea, it might be very confusing because for some years you have this policy towards having equal high schools, and then next they have special high schools building up and start getting established, and then next administration comes, that's just back to square one. So it must be a confusing time.
But the thing is, that has been that way for the past about 4 decades here in Korea because education is so important. People change their mind, and then there are policy changes and so on. So this time it won't be different.
All right, let's move over to the early voting system. It was introduced for the first time, which I took advantage of, and it was made possible by Korea's IT expertise.
Right, this is something very new.
Right. So what can you say about the impact and significance of this technology revolution that brought about this change?
There were a lot of different speculations before this election took place. They're saying because people were allowed to vote early on, maybe the overall turnout will increase. What we learned this time is that those people who are going to vote anyway just took advantage of this and then found this very convenient. I was wondering how this operation going to be carried out, and I was really delightfully surprised to find out actually you could have just walk in any location nationwide and then present your ID, and what it does is a totally computerized system.
Right.
They print out your sheets for your votes.
Yeah, seven
different kinds, depending on the locality. So I thought this was fascinating improvement and then technological innovation. And I'm sure other countries will pay attention in terms of emulating Korea's system here. In terms of political impact, as I said, it didn't really raise the overall the voter turnout here in Korea. But however, it made a big difference in terms of like encouraging or solidifying, strengthening political participation here. Of course, at the end, in terms of vote counting, it took longer time because they had to open the envelopes, every single one. So the overall vote counting itself took longer, and a lot of people became rather kind of, what should I say, impatient in terms of results, because people had to stay up all night until even early morning today. But the thing is, once again, this IT revolution and its impact on political activities here in Korea and political participation here in Korea is something that a lot of people around the world probably took a strong note of it, and I'm looking forward to reactions from around the world if you're watching this program.
Right. I mean, for one, it made it very convenient for us to go and vote.
Absolutely.
For a wrap-up, very briefly, we're running out of time, how will the results affect the Park administration's economic reform drive?
Well, I think you reported nicely. You know, the Park administration is now in a good position to drive their economic agenda, not being totally affected by, not being significantly affected by the result of this election this time. So we will look forward to the further future agendas being introduced and the drives being introduced as we go forward.
All right. Well, you know, we will have to wait and see how this really plays out and factors into the state of affairs. But as for now, it was more or less, I think, a tie for the elections.
Right. I agree.
All right, Dr. Kim Myung-ji, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is your business today on this Thursday. Thank you for watching. Do join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time on Early Edition at 6.